15 electoral votes to 244 for Donald Trump.
Pure talk.
So she's got to win 2 states right now.
And so
that's what he's got right now. I want to go back to Rebecca Jarvis, our senior business correspondent. You're talking about the Dow futures before. World markets are now open as well. Asian markets are open. What are we seeing?
We're seeing lower across the board, George.
He said after Brexit, this election, anything is now possible. A world is crumbling before our eyes, and he's absolutely right. And it's the world that was once dubbed the New World Order, the world that was built after the Cold War, promoting not a borderless world, but rejected by people who believe. Trump voters would tell you that the homeland counts more. Borders. Get the jobs back, as Trump has said. This is a rejection of the neoliberal world order that really has been the consensus of governments across the West and across the world for a generation.
Now to Florida in 2000, but not necessarily depending on other states in the upper Midwest fall.
Well, I think Hillary Clinton would wish it was Florida. We're going to have to grasp with a lot of there was major poll problems.
The Democratic campaign
side last 48 hours, and he's about to win.
And Republicans in Washington were convinced that he was going to lose, and they were telling that
very close.
Pennsylvania votes left for Hillary Clinton.
So leading in Pennsylvania,
he only needs to win one of them.
You talked about Jim Amala there. He talked about the Hispanic vote, and there were so many headlines in this last week about awaking a sleeping giant. When you talk about building the wall, about a deportation force early on in the campaign, I think what was missed is that he awoke another sleeping giant, and that is the uneducated white men in this country who heard someone who spoke to them. And that's what we're seeing with 49 points. I mean, that's a record. The biggest record going back to 1980 is an 11-point gap with non-college educated white men. We're looking at 49 points between Trump and Clinton tonight.
We're seeing gender gaps in some of these states, the likes of which we've never seen before.
I claims he would make
that his voters didn't take him literally, but they took him seriously, right? So the things that many people laughed at, said, there's no way he can do that. His voters thought, oh, no, he's serious. But the bad things he said, oh, no, he doesn't really mean that. I think what Obama, and we forgot what happened with Bill Clinton.
And New Hampshire.
Where we are now.
Anyone? Koki?
On all of these ballot measures around.
That's what Paul Ryan was saying all along.
Right.
Well, good luck, Paul Ryan, A, retaining your speakership, and B, imposing your will on Donald Trump, as Tom pointed out. This is a personal victory unlike any we've ever had in American politics, except for maybe George Washington. And the thing that is Trump's ideology, he's not a liberal, he's not a conservative, he's a nationalist. Make America Great Again is a nationalist slogan. And what counts for the people who voted for him, it seems to me, is that he wants to make America great again. They get a sense that people in this city, in New York City, a lot of them, have more in common with their counterparts, if they're in finance or media or whatever, in Frankfurt, in London, in Hong Kong, than they do with their cousins in Albany. And what they want is bring America home again. And I think that's his agenda.
I mean, there were 4, but a lot of them were college educated. Is missing that the polls are missing.
We have the late deciders, which is something we haven't looked at yet tonight. This was kind of interesting about deciding. When did you decide? Last few days, last week? Many decided much earlier, but when you break it down to, did you decide last week? And if you decided in the last few days, Trump edged out Hillary Clinton on that, and that will fuel arguments that perhaps the FBI director's announcement affected the final days of this race.
Okay, we are coming up on we left. And
for the days that following us, how was this missed? I actually think this is a bigger miss going on in the country.
President Obama and his campaign, you worked for President Obama. Tweet from David Plouffe, who of course ran as anyone could be. All the data as Matt Dowd had.
Even women.
Party you aside as a mayor of.
I don't know if there was some overconfidence in we definitely have a lot of regroup.
Donald Trump was talked about many times during the primaries that perhaps this was again in his role as chief foreign correspondent. Says he's going to tear up trade deals. Says he's going to renegotiate the terms of.
In shock, and they better fasten their seatbelts. Donald Trump has not only taken over and revolutionized the Republican Party and revolutionized presidential campaigning, he's about to take over the United States in this personalized, charismatic power.
General Mike Flynn, so looking back and is serving as a Marine. You wouldn't trust his. That's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. if you have a...
Right now, let's take one more look at these key states as the votes continue to trickle in. Again, start with New Hampshire.
I've been looking, so New Hampshire to have a lead.
Last year, basically seeing if any harming them.
Hey, I grew up in upstate New York, and you go home and you see Trump pen signs everywhere. And I think it goes back to this Bernie Sanders comparison we made earlier in the evening, which is both of these candidates, though, on varying degrees of the political spectrum, had a message for the working class in this country. You know, when they say make America great again, they were talking about opportunity for people who might be a high school graduate, who might not have had the opportunity to go to college or not been able to afford college, which is a huge issue in this country. And they spoke and had a message that resonated with people who said, I want the opportunity too. I should not be held back because I didn't have the opportunity that others had. And I think that, you know, like I mentioned earlier, Bernie Sanders might cringe at the notion that some of his supporters went to Donald Trump, but it was something Sanders tapped into and Trump tapped into, and I think there'll be an autopsy within the Democratic Party about whether or not Hillary Clinton was successful in getting that message across. That she could do something for them too.
Course of this campaign, he prevailed, got the victory.
He didn't even reveal who he was going to vote for until the very end. He finally said he was going to vote for Donald Trump. The Republican Party, outside of what happened, they've won Florida, they've won Wisconsin, and one that most Republicans had frankly written off. Now they've won Pennsylvania. New Hampshire is very close. Kelly Ayotte May, what does the Republican Party stand for? Because these Republican senators ran on a very different agenda than Donald Trump.
I think the Democratic Party, this election, they're going to, if this continues and the trend gives the electorate a larger share than the non-white share of the vote in this, 34% white males rejected the Democratic Party.
With non-whites as well.
Yeah, and I think our control room has the numbers here. It was the effort to get non-whites, and we're talking Hispanic voters, African-American voters, and take a look. This is on the far right what President Obama did in 2008, then 2012, and look what she did tonight, at least so far into the evening. 10 points she lost to what Obama was able to perform in 2012, just 4 years ago. And Donald Trump did much better. Look, he gained 11 points there with non-white voters across this country.
27 years ago today, the Berlin Wall fell. Opening an era of walls and borders being much more porous and shrinking Russian power. And
the Iraq War.
The Russian hacking isn't going to war.
A bigger point.
You know, just to Charlie's point here, this is pretty telling, Charlie. You know, if you break down that question about the comments that were made on that Access Hollywood bus, Trump voters, among Trump voters, they were asked, Trump's treatment of women, does it bother you? Those words, do they bother you? And the majority of Trump voters, 54%, said not much, not at all. And I think it's going to be a discussion in some households, moms and dads with their children. After those comments were made, there were so many ads. We saw that Hillary Clinton ad play over and over again in the battleground with Trump's comments and the children listening and watching, and what parents will say on this day after. Now, 54% say it doesn't matter that much.
The people I talked to just a few days ago said that was in his past. He's going forward. That's something.
But it's interesting. You know, Tom Yamas told us that Donald Trump went upstairs in Trump Tower to talk to Melania Trump. We saw her go to suburban Philadelphia in the final days of this campaign. A lot of people said, what was that speech? But she went and spoke about cutting down on bullying for precisely this reason, to try to get at this, that among the criticisms of Donald Trump is what he's done on Twitter, these comments made about women, and that perhaps was the first sign that they're aware they have to do some healing on that front.
George, I think it's the professionals. Jeb Bush had the most professional campaign operation, put in 50 times more headquarters than them. They outspent Donald Trump, I think, 5-1 in this. She won all 3 debates.
Well, I think that's right, but I think you also have to say that people voted for him. It's not just him. There are millions of Americans who voted for Donald Trump. And this country does rest on the consent of the governed.
So the first thing he has to do is make disruption safe, because that government is a problem. It isn't working very well.
I think that's one point in Stephanie Cutter, President Obama as well. What does he say? I want to bring in J.D. Vance. He's an author, the author of a book. Do they want tangibly to come out of this election?
Well, I definitely think there's going to be a medium or long-term period of reckoning. If Donald Trump doesn't deliver in the wrong direction, continues to go in the wrong direction, then yeah, people are going to wake up and they're going to be very frustrated. But I do think that folks feel very vindicated right now, right? They believed in their man. Well, I think it'll be enough for now. The question is whether it'll be enough 2 or 3 years from now.
Gary Moran.
And this is the most pugilistic president, if he becomes president, we've had maybe since Harry Truman, maybe for a long, long time. He has a pretty thin skin, and one thing a president should probably have is a thick hide. And one of the tests for Donald Trump, as he represents all of the people, as he represents all their hopes. I mean, he is the vessel of the hopes of millions of people and the destinies of all of us. Does he rise to that occasion? Does he thicken his hide a bit and keep his eye on the good of the people who put him there? Or is he going to be Donald Trump that we've come to know so well?
Well, that leads to a question. I'll bring this out. I'll start it with Alex Castellanos. Others can chime in. How much can a 70-year-old man change?
Boy, that's a good question. Look at Donald Trump on free trade. He says he's a free trader. The difference between Donald Trump and most Republicans is he's a free trader with teeth. He actually wants to fight for it. A couple of education. What's Republican policy, which is Trump policy? Open it up. So every parent can do the same thing Barack Obama does. Choose the best school for their kids. That's going to help. What's he going to do on the economy? It's sclerotic with regulation. The old economy is dying. A new one that has very little regulation is growing. He's going to reduce those regulations. These things actually have a real impact. Wow. There are real policy things in the Trump agenda that can actually open up this economy, education, all of this stuff.
But I don't know that Donald...
His message is, let's pull the drawbridges in, let's function on our own, let's improve our own thing, and
the tax returns. I mean, this will be the first president-elect, if this happens this evening, to have not released their tax returns in many decades. And I think the message that millions of Americans sent tonight was, it's not the kind of issue that you all believe it is in the media and in the establishment. I mean, it was a question we asked during the debates. It's a question we asked when we sat down with Donald Trump. He said he will when the audit is complete, but we never did see the tax returns.
What is the basis of that appeal? How come they say, even though he hasn't lived my life, even though he doesn't necessarily share my values, he's my guy?
Well, I think it's two things. One is the substance, that he's actually talking about taking the country in a new direction, even if he isn't especially specific about it. But there's also this matter of tone and of the norms of political discourse. And what Donald Trump has done is effectively blow up every norm that we thought everybody had to follow. And for folks who didn't like those norms in the first place, didn't think they were in the service of their interests, it's a pretty good deal for them.
It's been the longest sustained period of job growth in American history, and at some point that gives out by the nature of the business cycle. So he's already complained that the Fed has been rigging the interest rates in order to help the Democrats and prop up the economy. But he's a wild card on all these questions. We're assuming that he will govern as a normal president. He's been a bull in the china shop of this campaign, of political correctness, of how to conduct a campaign. He will be a bull in the china shop of the White House. And as I say, there are powers lying all around the presidency, including the power to get some lackey attorney general to appoint your special prosecutor.
Argument right now.
But they would have to do it in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
And in Wisconsin and in Michigan. I think in Michigan, they're pointing to the Detroit area, Macomb County, Oakland County. These are areas that they see a lot of votes still outstanding. But again, as the night goes on, it becomes more and more untenable. The numbers just aren't
And
there.
the Trump team simply believes they can't. We've heard so far the Clinton campaign says they're not going to say anything tonight. But we are waiting to hear from Donald Trump.
In fact, did say that, and you could see it on that stage. He talked about making sure this is a country where everyone can live up to his or her fullest potential. I thought that was interesting, given who he was up against tonight. He talked about that phone call. He thanked Hillary Clinton for her years of service. He said to be really historic, you have to do a great job. That was a real clear signal that he knows now the hard task lies ahead. And I have to say, this is a man who proudly went it alone, especially in these final days, talking about the big names, the celebrities, the president, the first lady out there helping Secretary Clinton. And it was often Donald Trump and his surrogates who often had his same last name.
John Carl, he is not going to be alone in Washington. Republicans now control who couldn't elect their successor. A real day of reckoning for the Democrats.
We do have a lot of work to do in our party.
A lot of work to do, but this is the night for Donald Trump. This is the night. This is his triumph.